This is the Full and Bloom interview with producer-engineer Alex Perialas. Inside the album, Testaments, Practice What You Preach. More info at fullandbloom.com.
Practice What You Preach was recorded in California at Fantasy Studio.
And how long did that record take to record?
Oh, that one. From pre-production, I think, again, like I always tried to work on a 42, 45 day schedule. Like basically a couple of weeks of pre-production. Drums usually took, at the most 2 to 3 days. And then, you try to do as much bass as you could with the rhythm section. The thing about Practice is that record was recorded live. And it truly is a live record, minus vocals. But like the band played live. And those guitar solos you hear that Alex Kolnick played, those were live takes that happened, during the session, during the take. There was not an overdub.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and that was what we did. We basically set up. We found a spot in the room that felt good at Fantasy in Studio A. That was a Neve 8108 console, and it was basically a Studer 800 tape machine. And we basically played the set every day. We played it twice. We played the whole record 2 times every day, and then we just basically pulled choice takes.
Wow.
Once we got one that was good, we pulled it. We go back and erase everything. So that was, again, I like that idea. It was very deliberate. And we had X amount of reels of tape, and once we got a take that we thought was great, we kept it, and then we'd still keep recording the entire set, the entire record would get recorded. We just kept picking away at the carcass, if you will. So.
Were they still writing at the time, or did they have everything down by the time they enter the studio?
For Practice, no, that record was written and ready to go. There's always pre-production, but
sure,
to work on stuff to make sure things are feeling right and tempos were set, blah de blah. But that was just ready to go, basically. I mean, there's always some tweaks that are happening along the way, but for the most part, if it needed to be tweaked, it was great. It was easy to tweak because you could hear the finished every day. Like when you were done, you were listening to a finished record, basically, because even in the control room. I was working with Michael Wagner. With Michael Rosen at that time. That's when I first met Michael in California, who was my assistant on that project. And we still are close friends. I just talked to him 2 weeks ago. He takes interns of mine from my program. So he's been very gracious in taking interns over the years, which is great.
Do you remember the budget for that record? I'm assuming it wasn't huge, but they were definitely growing.
It was sizable enough.
Like a $60,000 budget, or
it was less than it was. It was actually pretty good. It was a pretty decent budget because we were a Fantasy Studio, so that room was not cheap. I think we were paying close to. Trying to think, I bet you we were probably paying $10,000 a week for the studio. Those days, if you got a high end room like Fantasy, if you were getting the room for $1,500 to $1,800 a day, that was actually a deal. And so that was Studio A, and then we mixed in Studio D, and that wasn't cheap by any means.
So one thing that's always stood out, Practice What You Preach. I just thought it was a brilliant album. I can still remember just going up to the record store like you would do back in the old days, and the news didn't travel as fast back then. So I was like, wow, Testament has already released another album, and I bought it. And I couldn't stand Souls of Black more than anything. And even when I went back and looked, but I remember at that time even thinking, like, why are they already releasing another record? Like, I thought Practice What You Preach was like their Master of Puppets or their big album that should have been marketed for 2 years. It was like 6 or 8 months later, they released another record that you're not involved in, correct?
No, I didn't work on that project. Now, Michael did that record, actually. Michael Rosen.
Do you know any of that background, like why they released an album so quickly? Or it just seemed like, it says, at least on Wikipedia, it said that album by 92, it sold 450,000, and it still hasn't been certified gold. So it obviously was selling a lot of records even then. Do you have any of that background of why they released another record so quickly?
I don't know. I don't really know, because at that time when they were going to make that record, and I was really busy with something else at that point, and I can't remember exactly what was going on. It was just one of those things where I was actually surprised that they were going to go do something so soon. But I don't, I never really got involved in the politics of why, because I didn't work on the record, so I just kept my nose out of it. I've always been really careful about that kind of stuff.
Sure. Anything stand out from recording the title track?
From practice?
Yeah.
Nothing, but if you go back and look at the video that was done for that record, where Skolnick is playing a solo in the control room,
right?
The headphones fall off because they were just mocking playing that stuff at that point. That wasn't which was pretty funny. But what you see going on in that video is exactly how we recorded that record. That it was just a blast. And I think that the only takeaway for me was that every day, when you listen down to the record, you were hearing like it was a finished record, basically, because we actually had it EQ'd up in the control room, so it was sounded finished, So when you listen to a playback, it was like it had, there was effects and there was reverb and there was, compression and, things were EQ'd on the return path. It was sounding great. And that was the fun part of making that record, was that every day you got to listen to like a better version or a different version of the same bunch of songs, and it was up to us to figure out which ones made the record, which was really the fun part. I was always in awe of like how hard they worked, to play that set of songs every day. It was a blast. So,
what was your go-to method of recording Chuck Billy?
No, basically for that record, he actually sang into a 421. So
did he really? Wow.
Yeah. So it's a Sennheiser 421 that we wrapped up with some foam so we could hand hold it, and a half, like a kind of one like Joey would do, like with a half mic stand.
Right.
So we could actually hold it. Yeah. So that's what's so cool about that record, is that it's about as honest as it could be. And
were you just using I'm assuming, I guess the Neve board for the preamp?
Yeah, we had. Well, the thing about Fantasy is that they had so much amazing gear. I can send you a picture of me and Michael Rosen during that project that you'll love. That in the control room, Studio D, when we were mixing, that if every piece of gear that they had was stacked up. But no, they had great crews there, and basically there was Neves and there was SSL stuff, and there was always high-end other stuff around.
And did you just mix it up, or did you use something? You don't recall what you used? What preamp?
For his vocal?
Correct.
I'm pretty sure we used Neves, but I can't. I'd have to go back and look.
Right.
These are things that I can get back to you on. So you can send me a little list, a laundry list of questions. So to verify some of this stuff, I can go back and look, because I've got all my notes.
What was it like working with Alex?
Oh, it was amazing. All those guys, they were just a great band. And I had worked with Alex. Obviously, this would be the third record I worked with Alex on, when he was just basically wet behind the ears, 17-year-old when I first worked with him. So, he was brilliant. He's just, some people have a gift, and he's got it. So.
And that record still hasn't been certified gold, correct?
I don't believe so. Nobody sent me a check.
Yeah. That's just crazy that it sold that many copies. And is Anthrax the biggest seller that you've had?
Biggest seller of a project I work on? Probably not. You probably don't know that there was a time in the mid-era of like late 90s. I worked with Timberland and Missy Elliott, and did a couple of like pretty good sized records of that genre, of like basically R&B hip hop.
I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah. So those records probably, they outsell close.
Probably, yeah.
The Aaliyah record was sold like 3 million copies or something. So I think maybe that one might have done a little better.
But as far as metal bands, you think Anthrax is that the top dog? Probably
Anthrax, Anthrax, Testament.
Yeah,
they were probably the top.
And so Timbaland. Now, what was it like working with him?
Oh, it was amazing. It's a whole different thing though. It's basically everything was a sequencer, and writing beats, and the song creation was like super like pop, pop music.
Sure.
So it was. You can go back and look at those records. The record that from the Aaliyah, before she passed away, unfortunately, was called "One in a Million." That was the name of the album. And
did you engineer that, or what did you do on that?
I was, they came to my studio. It was Jimmy Douglas who was the engineer, but I'm credited as engineer as well.
Do you keep in touch with any of those bands anymore, like Anthrax or Testament?
Yeah, I do. I talked to Chuck. Just recently, because of social media, it's a little easier to stay in contact these days.
What are 3 highlights from your career?
Just, been blessed to have worked with the bands I've been able to work with. All of them, regardless. Very rarely did I ever have any bad words with any of those folks. Still friendly, to a point, I guess. And got to see a bunch of them last summer. That was cool. I would say highlights would be working with Tom Dowd. That was probably one of the highlights of my career. And other people like Michael Wagner and Eddie Kramer and working with Carl in the early days. Those are all highlights. It was always fun, and obviously all the bands, and then of course my teaching. These days that's a highlight because I get to work with really, really gifted, smart, engaged kids that are out, winning Grammys. One of my former students won a Grammy 2 years ago. She's doing great, and I have a program that really pushes hard. We have a bunch of young women in the program, and my goal is to really, change the culture of being always the guy thing, to be super talented and have the ability to be respected as an engineer and producer as a woman. So that's important to me.
Anything besides SOD from the metal days, one that stands out as just being an incredible experience?
Probably making the Practice What You Preach record. When you're working with a band that can play something live like that in a room and get that vibe and that energy going on, and that's pretty crazy cool stuff, And of course, working with Anthrax, all those bands, I really would never single one out as better than the other. They're all super important because for me, when I work on something, I invest myself in it. You give away a piece of your soul every time you make a record, and that's if you do it at the level that you're supposed to, and you're committed to a project, then you're all in. You're there to serve the client and to serve the music, and to make something that you can all be proud of. And at the end of the day, the most important thing is it's the band's record, not my record. I'm just there to try to help steer the creativity. It's not me telling you what to do. It's me trying to help you do what you want to do. That's what it's about.
With Testament, was that the first record that you did like that? How did you record the other ones? Just the typical way?
Done like, the traditional metal style of what a lot of, you probably heard from a lot of engineers. You work in doing the rhythm section, typically drums, bass, and one rhythm guitar is a scratch guitar. You go back, once you get the drums done, you go back and fix everything that's wrong with the bass, and then you do all the guitars, and do the vocals, and you do all the overdubs and the lead.
And so what made you want to do that on Practice?
It was their idea to do it that way. They wanted to make it, they just really wanted to play live in the room together. So that's what we did. That
record was, to me, one of the best from that era. I really always thought that record should have been like a double platinum thing. It was one of those magical records.
It had a vibe, right? And that's all you ever want as a helper on a project. You just want to hope that when you're done, that people feel the energy that you tried to create, or that people can feel the vibe of what you were trying to get across, whether it's a country record or classical record, a metal record, any project. You just want people to feel something, when it's all over with. If it doesn't make you feel something, you fail.